the first thing I think that we can all agree upon, whatever issues you might hold most dear to you, whatever solutions you think are key to the country, we all agree that there has to be a political revolution. And that the majority of the American people feel that something has gone wrong in this country. And they want deep, deep change. Our economic system is not working. Our planet is dying. We have to address racism in this country, which has not been mentioned that much. And unless we have a political revolution, there is no way that we can do that. And so I want to make the point in 3 general areas that Bernie Sanders will be the nominee of the party, and he will win the general election. And I believe that if he is the nominee, he will win the general election quite easily. The first thing is, you know, I've known Bernie for many, many years, mostly in the time that I did a lot of lobbying on behalf of working people in Washington. So, you know, living in the Northeast, we'd go down to Washington, we'd knock on Bernie Sanders' door. At the time he was a congressman, later a senator. And in some way it was a wasted time. And I mean that in this sense, is Bernie was always with us. If there was an effort to defeat bad trade laws, Bernie was there. For those of us who believed that we needed single-payer health care, Medicare for all, that we had to kill the drug companies and the insurance companies because we all pay too much, Bernie was there arguing for single-payer long, long ago, for at least 10 and 20 years. And about 3 years ago, putting on, that was sort of my organizer's hat, putting on my writer's hat, I had the great fortune and honor of spending probably close to 12 hours with Bernie over the course of 3 days in Burlington, Washington, writing a piece for a national magazine, an interview with him. And I'll never forget walking out of his Burlington office. And I've been in politics a long time, and I've kind of known Bernie. And so I'm kind of cynical when it comes to many politicians. I've actually run as a candidate too. And I'll never forget walking out of his Burlington office into the plaza and just being struck by the incredible authenticity of this man. And that authenticity comes from a very, very simple thing. That he has deeply held principles that go back 30 and 40 years. What he is saying today is not because he's gone out and poll tested it. He doesn't have a circle of 200 advisors telling him this is what the people want to hear. What he is articulating and what he wants for America are the things that he has fought for all his political life, and before he was actually in political office. So when he stood on the House floor and argued against the Iraq War, and I want to commend Lincoln Chafee for being the only Republican senator for voting against that war. A disastrous war that to this day has echoes across America. The trillions of dollars we spent, the thousands of lives, tens of thousands of lives of Iraqis and Americans that were lost on an immoral and illegal war. The fact that without the Iraq War, ISIS would not have been created. The Iraq War created ISIS. Bernie Sanders, and thank God for you two, go check out his speech opposing the Iraq War. Back then, every point he made was prescient. Every point he made came to pass. And it came from his deeply held beliefs that war is not the answer. That first you have to explore every possible avenue of diplomacy, and it's one reason he was a very early and strong supporter of the Iran deal that the President and Secretary Kerry wisely negotiated and is now law. So I was struck by his authenticity. And authenticity has some concrete examples and principles behind that about all his policies that he's putting forth today. And I want to focus just on one right now, which is education. So I noticed I want to focus on education because I noticed there are some young people in the audience, and probably any of the young people who left college, four-year college or probably two-year college, left college with a huge debt. Tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars. When I went to college, I went to the University of California, which was a state school, my entire fees, my entire cost for the year was, does anybody want to take a guess? Not zero. Well, you're actually right in one sense. There was no tuition. That was supposed to be free, but they were called fees. You know, they got around that a little bit. $1,000 the entire academic year. And now we have young people leaving college with $100,000 in debt, $200,000 in debt, which follows them for 10, 20, 30 years in their life, sometimes for the rest of their lives. And Bernie now is proposed, as you know, free college for anybody who needs it, 4-year college. It's nice to see that other campaigns have adopted that too and is now talking about free college, because imitation is, of course, the highest form of flattery. Bernie's proposal, though, shows 3 things that kind of blew me away if you think about both morality, economics, and shared sacrifice. So the first thing is, people who want to be educated in this country should have education. What's simpler than that? If you want to be able to get a good job in the future, you should be able to get a college education and not be crushed by the debt once you leave college. The second thing is the idea of shared sacrifice. What Bernie's proposing is that to pay for that, we're going to ask Wall Street to pay essentially for college education through something called the financial transactions tax. It's a very, very simple idea that says that on the big Wall Street speculators who are moving millions and millions of shares all around the world and are making huge profits, we're going to ask them to pay just a little bit of money. And that's going to go to make sure that all young people can get a decent education and leave college free of that debt. As he likes to put it in a lot more sing-songy way, we bailed out Wall Street. Now it's time for Wall Street to bail out the middle class when it comes to college. And the last point I think that is really sometimes forgotten is that this is an economic issue. Bernie's 4-year free college is about economic development. Because think of this right now. If you leave college with $100,000 in debt, how are you going to buy a house? How are you going to buy a car? How are you going to go spend money for food or other things, clothes, entertainment? You can't. 25% of people's income often goes into paying back debt. If we take that off of people, we're going to pour an enormous amount of money into the economy over many, many, many years. So free college education both shows morality. People should have free education and be educated. It should be shared sacrifice. We should ask the richer people to pay for a better society, education for everyone. And it's an economic development idea. And to me, that goes back to Bernie's basic principles in life. Let's find out how to grow the economy, and let's make sure that we have a shared sacrifice and that all people contribute to a better society. The last point I want to make is really about the point I made before, which is authenticity, and why I think that Bernie speaks to people all around the nation. Mark being one of them, the tens of thousands of people who are pouring out to rallies everywhere. Forget the polls for a second. Just look at the amazing energy. Look at the amazing energy. I've seen that in states everywhere. I was in South Carolina. Thousands of people at rallies. Young people of all colors, all races, coming to hear an authentic voice. But I don't actually want to point out the enthusiasm for all the supporters. I want to bring up Liberty University. How many people saw Bernie speak at Liberty University? Have you seen that? Those of you who haven't, go back to YouTube and spend a few minutes listening to an amazing speech. And what was amazing about that speech was that Bernie went down into, if I could use the term, the lion's den. It was Jerry Falwell's Liberty University. He went down to speak to 12,000 people, most of whom he knew on at least many issues like abortion, marriage equality, others, were not going to agree with him. But his philosophy is that we as Democrats, we as progressives, we as liberals have to build bridges on the issues of inequality, racism, the power of the banks, the need for campaign finance reform. He has advocated, as you know, a constitutional amendment to remove Citizens United. he has advocated and is passionate about talking to the other side, going down to places across the nation in what people call red states. So when he went to Jerry, and I watched this, it was really stunning. He gave the same talk he gave in many, many places, but he was able to dig into references that people in that audience would understand, using the Bible to talk about inequality, and the fact that the Bible talks about our need as human beings to make sure that everybody is cared for. And in the interviews afterwards, and I watched the media afterward, papers and TV clips, because I was curious about this, many people said, look, I don't still agree with him about abortion and some of those issues, but man, he really touched me because of his speeches about inequality and because of his authenticity. That's the kind of person that we need as a Democrat, to be going out all across the country to build bridges, because as he says, the last election, the Republicans did not win that election. We lost that election because we did not excite people. We did not bring people out in every corner of the country, both our voters, independents, and frankly Republicans. And I believe that the only way that we bring people out in large numbers next year to win the White House is to have a nominee with the authenticity that Bernie Sanders represents and can bring to the people. Thank you very much.